Everyone is focused on the chip, the biometric scan, the digital ID, the global control system slowly being built around you. And yes, 5 technologies are already being tested right now that match Revelation 13 with disturbing precision. But here is what almost no one is saying. The mark of the beast was never primarily about technology. A prophetic warning, written nearly 2,000 years ago, points to something far deeper. Something happening inside you, not just around you. The final test won't be about what's in your hand. It will be about who you choose to obey. There is a moment in history when prophecy stops being a subject of study and becomes a living reality unfolding in front of your eyes. We may be living in that moment right now. For generations, theologians, pastors, and sincere believers have discussed the mark of the beast as something distant, a future event, a final chapter yet to be written. But in 2026, the conversation has shifted, not because someone changed the interpretation, because the world itself has changed. Technologies that once existed only in the imagination of science fiction writers are now being tested, integrated, and quietly normalized in the daily lives of millions of people around the globe. And most believers are not paying attention. Hit that subscribe button right now, and if you believe this message needs to reach someone struggling with spiritual exposure, tap that like button so this truth can travel further. This is not a video about conspiracy theories. It is not about fear, paranoia, or political division. This is a careful, biblical, and prophetic examination of one of the most urgent questions any serious Christian should be asking in this moment of history. Are we closer to the final conflict described in Revelation 13 than we think? And more importantly, do we truly understand what that conflict is really about? Because here is what most people miss entirely. The conversation about the mark of the beast has been almost completely dominated by technology. Chips, biometrics, digital IDs, surveillance systems. And while those things deserve serious attention, they have quietly pushed the most critical part of the prophecy out of the public conversation. The spiritual dimension, the question of worship, the question of loyalty, the question of who you ultimately choose to obey. You need to stay until the end, because what you'll discover may change the way you see your spiritual life. A Christian author who dedicated her life to prophetic study and biblical interpretation left behind a body of work that remains strikingly relevant today. Not because she predicted specific technologies, but because she understood the spiritual architecture behind the final conflict. Her warnings were not about gadgets or systems. They were about the human heart, about what happens when convenience, comfort, and cultural pressure slowly reshape what we believe and how we live. Her insights will guide several moments throughout this video, not as doctrine, but as confirmation of what the Bible already declares with unmistakable clarity. What you are about to hear in this video is not designed to frighten you into a decision. It is designed to awaken you to a reality that is already forming, quietly, gradually, and with remarkable precision, around the very framework that Revelation 13 describes. 5 technologies are already being tested. The world is already moving. And the question this video will ultimately ask you is not whether the mark is coming. The question is whether you understand what it truly means, and whether you are spiritually prepared for the choice it will demand. There is a reason the conversation about the mark of the beast has become almost inseparable from technology, and that reason is not irrational. It is not the product of fearful minds or conspiratorial imaginations. It is the product of observation. Careful, honest observation of a world that is changing faster than most people can process. When you watch governments around the world accelerating the development of digital identity systems, when you see financial institutions pushing toward cashless economies, when you read headlines about microchip implants being tested in human volunteers, it becomes nearly impossible not to connect those realities to the ancient warning written in Revelation 13. The patterns are too visible, the direction is too clear, and so the instinct to link technology and prophecy is, at its core, a spiritually alert instinct, even if the full picture requires much deeper examination. To understand why this connection feels so natural, you have to go back to the text itself. Revelation 13 describes a global system of economic control so comprehensive that no one can buy or sell without bearing a specific mark. For most of human history, that level of universal financial control was simply impossible. There was no infrastructure for it. There was no technology capable of tracking billions of individual transactions, monitoring compliance on a global scale, and enforcing economic exclusion with precision. But today, that infrastructure exists. Digital payment networks process trillions of transactions every year. Central banks in dozens of countries are actively developing digital currencies designed to replace physical cash. Biometric identification systems can verify identity in seconds using nothing but a face or a fingerprint. The logistics that Revelation 13 describes are no longer science fiction. They are engineering projects with timelines and budgets. The cultural conversation accelerated dramatically after 2020. The global pandemic forced billions of people into digital systems almost overnight. Remote work, digital payments, online commerce, digital health records, all of these became normalized with remarkable speed. And then came vaccine passports, digital documents that determined whether you could enter a restaurant, board a plane, or attend a public event. For millions of sincere Christians around the world, that moment felt like a rehearsal, not a conspiracy, but a preview, a demonstration that large-scale behavioral compliance tied to a digital credential was not only possible, but socially acceptable. The ease with which it happened, and the speed with which most people accepted it, left a deep impression on the prophetic imagination of the global church. Social media then became an amplifier. Videos, articles, and commentary from every tradition of Christianity began flooding platforms with claims, comparisons, and warnings. Some were thoughtful and biblically grounded. Others were reactionary and poorly researched. But the sheer volume of content created a kind of collective consciousness around the idea that the mark of the beast was not a distant theological abstraction. It was an imminent technological reality. And that consciousness spread beyond traditional Christian circles. People with no religious background at all began engaging with the question, not because of faith, but because the surveillance architecture of the modern world genuinely unsettled them. The conversation about the mark became, in many ways, a spiritual language for a much broader anxiety about control, freedom, and the future of human autonomy. But here is where the conversation started to drift in a dangerous direction. As the focus intensified on specific technologies, chips, QR codes, digital wallets, biometric databases, the theological core of the prophecy began to fade into the background. The question shifted from what does Revelation 13 actually mean to which technology fits the description. And that shift, however understandable, represents a significant error in prophetic interpretation. Because when you reduce the mark of the beast to a specific device or system, you make the prophecy dependent on a particular technological outcome. And prophecy, by its very nature, does not work that way. Biblical prophecy describes spiritual realities using symbolic language. It paints the architecture of a conflict, not the specifications of a product. This is not a reason to dismiss the technological dimension entirely. That would be the opposite error, The relationship between modern technology and the final conflict described in Revelation 13 is real, and it deserves serious, biblically grounded attention. But it must be approached in the right order. First, the spiritual foundation, then the technological application. First the meaning, then the mechanism. Because if you get the foundation wrong, everything built on top of it will lead you to the wrong conclusion, and potentially to a misidentification so significant that it leaves you unprepared for the actual test when it arrives. And what is that test exactly? That is the question that will begin to take shape in the next section of this video. And the answer may surprise you in ways you did not expect. Most people who have an opinion about the mark of the beast have never actually sat with the text of Revelation 13 long enough to let it speak for itself. They have read summaries, watched videos, heard sermons, absorbed cultural references, but the raw, unfiltered language of the chapter itself has been quietly replaced by layers of interpretation, assumption, and borrowed opinion. And that is a significant problem, because when you read Revelation 13 without the noise of modern commentary, you discover something that changes the entire framework of the conversation. The chapter is not primarily about a technology. It is not primarily about a system. It is primarily about a choice, a deeply personal, spiritually defining choice about who or what you will worship, obey, and ultimately surrender your life to. Everything else in the chapter, the economic control, the enforcement, the mark itself, flows from that central question of allegiance. The chapter opens with a vision of two beasts. The first rises from the sea, a powerful, globally dominant political and religious entity that receives its authority from a greater spiritual source, described as the dragon. The second rises from the earth, an entity that looks less threatening, speaks with a degree of cultural familiarity, but ultimately serves the agenda of the first. The second beast is the one who enforces the system, who causes the earth and its inhabitants to worship the first beast, who performs signs and wonders to deceive, and who ultimately institutes the economic mandate that no one may buy or sell unless they carry the mark, the name, or the number of the first beast. Read carefully and you will notice something remarkable. The mark is not introduced as a technology. It is introduced as a consequence of worship. It is the outward expression of an inward alignment, a declaration of where your ultimate loyalty belongs. The language of Revelation 13 is deeply rooted in the symbolic vocabulary of the Hebrew prophets. John, the author of Revelation, was a Jewish follower of Jesus, writing in a tradition where symbolic imagery carried precise theological meaning. The forehead and the hand, the two locations where the mark is placed, are not arbitrary anatomical references. They echo the language of Deuteronomy, where God commands Israel to bind his commandments as a sign on their hands and as frontlets between their eyes. The forehead represents the mind, the seat of thought, conviction, and belief. The hand represents action, the expression of what the mind has decided. Together, they describe the complete human being, what you think and what you do, what you believe and how you live. The mark, therefore, is not fundamentally a physical implant. It is the stamp of a spiritual decision expressed through the totality of a person's life. This does not mean the physical dimension is irrelevant. A mark is, by definition, something observable, something that can be identified by the system enforcing it, something that distinguishes those who comply from those who refuse. But the physical expression of the mark, whatever form it ultimately takes, is downstream of the spiritual reality it represents. A person does not receive the mark by accident. They do not receive it by ignorance or by passive drift. Revelation 13 is describing a conscious choice made in the context of intense social, economic, and potentially physical pressure, the choice to align with the system. The choice to prioritize access, comfort, and survival over fidelity to God. That choice, made from the inside, then manifests on the outside. The mark is the visible signature of an invisible surrender. It is also essential to note what Revelation 13 says about the scope of this system. The chapter uses universal language deliberately. Every tribe, tongue, and nation. All who dwell on the earth, the entire world marveled and followed the beast. This is not a regional conflict. It is not a national political debate. It is a global spiritual crisis affecting every culture, every background, every tradition. And in that universal context, the worship demanded by the beast is contrasted with a specific countercultural allegiance. The worship of the Creator, the one who made heaven and earth and sea and springs of water, as Revelation 14 immediately declares after describing the beast. The final conflict of Revelation is not between political systems or technological platforms. It is between two forms of worship, two loyalties, two definitions of ultimate authority. Understanding this does not make the danger smaller. It makes it larger, because it means the threat is not waiting for a specific chip to be developed or a particular law to be passed. The threat is already active in the spiritual atmosphere of this moment. The conditions that Revelation 13 describes, the centralization of authority, the pressure toward conformity, the economic leverage used to enforce compliance, the blurring of religious and political power, these are not future projections. They are present realities, operating at varying degrees of intensity across different parts of the world right now. And the spiritual posture required to resist them is not primarily technological awareness. It is something far older, far deeper, and far more personally demanding. What that posture looks like and how it connects to the economic dimension of the prophecy is exactly where this video is heading next. Of all the elements in Revelation 13, the economic dimension may be the one that speaks most directly to the world we are living in right now. The language is deceptively simple. No one may buy or sell unless they have the mark. 7 words that carry the weight of an entire global system. 7 words that describe a form of social and economic exclusion so total, so comprehensive, that survival itself becomes dependent on compliance. And when you hold those 7 words up against the financial architecture being built in the world today, the resonance is impossible to ignore. We are living through the most rapid transformation of the global financial system in recorded history. And whether people recognize it as prophetically significant or not, the infrastructure described in Revelation 13 is not a future possibility. In many of its essential components, it already exists. To understand the depth of this economic dimension, you need to understand what buying and selling represented in the ancient world, and what it represents today. In the 1st century Roman world, commerce was deeply intertwined with religious allegiance. Trade guilds required participation in pagan worship. Markets were often organized around temple economies. To be excluded from buying and selling was not merely an economic inconvenience, it was social death. It meant exclusion from community, from protection, from the basic networks of survival. The person who could not participate in the economic system was effectively rendered invisible, marginalized, and powerless. And that is precisely the pressure Revelation 13 describes, not the pressure of violence, at least not initially. The pressure of economic suffocation, the slow, systemic withdrawal of access until compliance becomes the only visible option. Now translate that dynamic into the language of 2026. Central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, are no longer theoretical proposals. They are active policy projects in more than 100 countries. China has already piloted its digital yuan with millions of users. The European Central Bank has moved its digital euro project into a preparation phase. The United States Federal Reserve has explored the technological foundations of a digital dollar through a series of research partnerships and pilot programs. These systems are programmable. They can be designed with expiration dates, spending restrictions, geographic limitations, and compliance conditions built directly into the currency itself. A government operating a CBDC could, in principle, restrict a citizen's ability to purchase certain goods, access certain services, or transact in certain locations, all without deploying a single law enforcement officer. The economic pressure is built into the architecture of the money itself. This is not speculation, this is engineering, and the theological weight of it is staggering when you read it alongside Revelation 13. Because the prophecy does not describe a world where people are physically prevented from surviving. It describes a world where survival has been made conditional, where access to the basic necessities of life has been placed behind a gate of compliance, where the choice is not between freedom and imprisonment. It is between faith and food, between conviction and economic participation. That is a different kind of pressure than most believers have ever been asked to endure. It is the kind of pressure that works gradually, invisibly, and with devastating effectiveness on the human will. Ellen White, a Christian author who wrote extensively about the final conflict of history, described with remarkable precision a time when God's people would face economic exclusion for their faithfulness, not as a distant eventuality, but as a defining test of genuine discipleship. The connection between economic control and spiritual allegiance is not new to the biblical narrative. The book of Daniel describes a moment when three young men faced the choice between compliance with a royal decree and fidelity to God. They were not asked to renounce their faith in words, they were simply asked to bow, a single act of outward conformity, a moment of social participation that everyone around them considered entirely normal and expected, and their refusal, quiet, firm, and costly, is the model that Revelation 13 echoes across centuries. The economic pressure of the final conflict will not feel like tyranny to those who embrace it. It will feel like common sense, like social responsibility, like the reasonable thing to do in a complex and interconnected world. That is precisely what makes it so spiritually dangerous. The question this raises for every believer watching this video is not abstract. It is immediate and personal. How dependent are you on systems you do not control? How deeply has your sense of security, comfort, and stability been woven into economic structures that could, at some point, demand a form of compliance that conflicts with your conscience? This is not a call to withdraw from society or to prepare for a physical survival scenario. It is a call to examine the interior of your faith. Because the economic dimension of Revelation 13 is not designed to catch you off guard with sudden force. It is designed to work through gradual normalization until the moment of decision arrives and the weight of what you have already accepted makes resistance feel impossible. And the 5 technologies being tested right now, the ones this video promised you, are part of that normalization. The next section begins to name them, and the first one is already in your pocket. The first technology is one that most people interact with multiple times every single day without giving it a second thought. The smartphone, not as a curiosity or a convenience anymore, but as an identity document, a financial instrument, a surveillance terminal, and a behavioral data archive, all compressed into a device that rarely leaves your hand. In 2026, your phone knows more about you than any government database in human history ever has. It knows where you sleep, where you worship, what you buy, who you talk to, what you read, how long you linger on certain ideas, and what categories of information you return to in moments of private reflection. It is the most intimate piece of technology ever mass adopted by a civilization, and increasingly, it is not optional. In many cities and countries around the world, the smartphone is already a functional prerequisite for full economic participation. Without it, you cannot access government services, make digital payments, prove your identity, or navigate the basic logistics of modern life. The second technology is biometric identification, fingerprints, facial recognition, iris scans, vein mapping, gait analysis. The infrastructure for identifying and tracking human bodies with extraordinary precision is no longer experimental. It is operational. Airports, banks, government offices, hospitals, schools, and even retail stores in dozens of countries have already integrated biometric systems into their standard operating procedures. China's social credit system represents the most advanced integration of biometric identification with behavioral compliance in the world. A system that assigns scores to citizens based on their actions and restricts access to travel, finance, and social services accordingly. But China is not alone. Western democracies are investing heavily in biometric infrastructure under the language of efficiency, security, and convenience. And the critical question that Revelation 13 forces us to ask is this: at what point does an identification system become an enforcement system? At what point does the infrastructure of verification become the infrastructure of the mark? The third technology is implantable microchips. This is the one that generates the most immediate prophetic alarm in popular Christian culture. And while the alarm is understandable, it requires careful nuance. Subcutaneous RFID and NFC chips have already been voluntarily implanted in tens of thousands of people across Europe, the United States, and Australia. These chips currently serve relatively limited functions: unlocking doors, storing medical data, making contactless payments. But the trajectory of miniaturization and functionality is clear. Neural interface companies are developing implantable devices capable of reading and influencing brain activity. Elon Musk's Neuralink received regulatory approval for human trials and has already implanted its device in multiple subjects. The convergence of identity verification, financial access, and neurological interface into a single implantable system is not a paranoid fantasy. It is a published research agenda with funded timelines and institutional backing. The fourth technology is artificial intelligence used for behavioral prediction and social management. AI systems are already being deployed by governments and corporations to analyze population behavior, predict social unrest, identify individuals who represent compliance risks, and optimize the delivery of incentives and penalties to shape mass behavior. These systems do not require physical force. They do not require visible enforcement. They operate through the architecture of digital environments, adjusting what information you see, what options you are offered, what friction you encounter when you try to access resources. The algorithmic management of human behavior at scale is the most sophisticated form of soft coercion ever developed, and it operates for most people entirely below the level of conscious awareness. You do not feel it controlling you. You simply find yourself making choices that the system has quietly made easier, more comfortable, and more socially rewarded than their alternatives. The fifth technology is programmable digital currency. The CBDCs already discussed in the previous section, but now seen in their full technological context. What distinguishes programmable digital currency from ordinary electronic money is not just its digital nature. It is the capacity for conditional access built directly into the monetary instrument itself. Traditional money, once transferred, belongs to the recipient and can be used freely. Programmable digital currency can be designed to expire if not spent within a certain time frame, restricted to approved categories of goods and services, geographically bounded to specific regions, and automatically withheld from individuals who fail to meet compliance conditions set by the issuing authority. The economic leverage this creates is unprecedented in human history. And when combined with the biometric identification, behavioral AI, and digital identity infrastructure being built simultaneously, it forms a system of economic and social control that matches the prophetic description of Revelation 13 with a precision that should cause every serious believer to pause and reflect. Now here is where the critical nuance becomes essential. And this is the point where this video begins to diverge from most of the content you will find on this subject. The fact that these 5 technologies fit the prophetic scenario does not mean that any one of them, or all of them together, constitutes the mark of the beast. The fit is real. The trajectory is alarming. The prophetic resonance is genuine. But the mark of the beast is not defined by the technology used to enforce it. It is defined by what it represents spiritually, the allegiance it demands, the worship it requires, the authority it elevates above the authority of God. Technology can be the vehicle, but the destination is always spiritual. And the next section of this video will examine the most dangerous error that the technological focus has produced. An error that could leave millions of sincere believers watching the wrong horizon when the real test arrives. There is a kind of spiritual danger that does not announce itself with obvious warning signs. It does not feel like rebellion or compromise. It feels like discernment, like vigilance, like being the person in the room who sees what others are missing. And one of the most subtle forms of this danger is what happens when sincere, biblically concerned believers become so focused on identifying the specific mechanism of the mark of the beast that they lose sight of its actual nature. The obsession with finding the right technology, the correct chip, the precise system, the definitive implementation can become a spiritual decoy so effective that it leaves the very people who are most worried about the mark of the beast the least prepared to recognize it when it arrives, because they are watching for a device, and the real test will be a decision. The theological problem with reducing the mark to a chip or a system is that it fundamentally misreads the genre of the book of Revelation. Revelation is apocalyptic literature, a category of writing with its own rules, its own symbolic vocabulary, and its own interpretive tradition. In apocalyptic literature, physical objects and actions are consistently used to represent spiritual realities. The lamb with 7 eyes is not a biological description. The dragon with 7 heads is not a zoological report. The river of life is not a hydrological feature. And the mark on the forehead or hand is not, at its foundation, a dermatological or technological specification. It is a symbol, a carefully chosen, theologically loaded symbol for the deepest form of human allegiance. What you think and what you do, united in service to a power that has placed itself in opposition to the authority of God. This matters enormously in practice. If you believe the mark of the beast is a microchip, you will spend your prophetic energy watching for chip mandates. If a chip mandate never comes, or if it comes in a form you do not recognize as such, you will either dismiss the warning entirely or spend your life in a state of perpetual alert that has no practical spiritual anchor. Meanwhile, the actual conditions of the final conflict, the pressure to conform, the economic leverage, the blurring of religious and civil authority, the demand for a loyalty that supersedes your conscience, can be advancing all around you without triggering your alarm system, because your alarm is calibrated to the wrong frequency. You are listening for a specific sound when the real danger moves in silence. History offers a sobering lesson here. In Jesus' own time, the most theologically educated people in Israel were also the most wrong about how the Messiah would come. They had studied the prophecies, they knew the texts, they had frameworks, traditions, and interpretive methods refined over centuries, but their frameworks were calibrated to the wrong frequency. They expected a political deliverer, a military king, a visible establishment of national power. And so when the Messiah arrived, quietly in a manger, in a marginalized region among common people, their prophetic infrastructure failed to recognize him. Their very expertise became an obstacle, and the parallel for our moment in history is not comfortable. Prophetic expertise that is calibrated around the wrong expectation does not protect you from being deceived. In many cases, it makes deception more likely, because confidence in your framework makes you resistant to correction. Ellen White, whose writings on the final conflict remain among the most detailed prophetic treatments produced in the modern Christian tradition, addressed this tendency with unusual directness. She wrote of a time when the people of God would face not a dramatic, sudden trial that announced itself with unmistakable clarity, but a gradual, quiet pressure, a slow normalization of compromise that would be far more dangerous precisely because it did not feel dangerous. She described the final test as one that would require a living faith, a daily, personal, deeply cultivated connection with God, not merely a correct theological position or a well-researched prophetic interpretation. The person who passes the final test of Revelation 13 is not the one with the most accurate timeline for the mark's implementation. It is the one whose relationship with God is so real, so intimate, and so practiced that no amount of social pressure, economic leverage, or deceptive religious language can move them from their foundation. So what does this mean for you, watching this video right now? It means that prophetic awareness, as valuable as it is not a substitute for spiritual formation. It means that knowing the 5 technologies being tested is less important than knowing the God whose authority they are being tested against. It means that the most urgent preparation for the final conflict is not building a bunker, withdrawing your savings, or refusing every digital system on principle. It is the daily, quiet, consistent deepening of your walk with God, your prayer life, your relationship with Scripture, your willingness to let God's Word reshape your values, your habits, your definitions of security and comfort and belonging. Because when the moment of decision arrives, and Revelation 13 is clear that it will arrive, the question will not be whether you identified the right chip. The question will be whether you know whose voice to follow. And that knowledge is built long before the crisis, which is exactly why the next section of this video matters more than any technology we have named so far. Worship is the axis around which all of Revelation rotates. From the opening chapters to the closing vision, the entire book is structured around a single recurring question: who deserves ultimate allegiance? The throne room scenes in Revelation 4 and 5 establish the standard: the Creator God, seated in majesty and surrounded by living creatures who declare his worthiness without ceasing. And every subsequent vision in the book, the seals, the trumpets, the bowls, the beasts, the mark, is an echo of that foundational question, reverberating through the complexities of human history until it reaches its final, unavoidable resolution. The Mark of the Beast is not a standalone technological event dropped into the middle of an otherwise ordinary world. It is the climactic expression of a conflict over worship that began before human history and will conclude at its end. To worship in the biblical sense is not merely to sing songs or attend religious services. Worship in its deepest meaning is the act of acknowledging supreme worth. It is the posture of your entire life, oriented toward what you consider most fundamentally real, most ultimately authoritative, and most deserving of your loyalty, your trust, and your obedience. You worship what you fear losing most. You worship what shapes your deepest decisions. You worship what you would sacrifice other things to protect. By that definition, worship is not confined to sanctuaries. It happens in bank offices, in courtrooms, in family arguments, in private moments of temptation, in the daily navigation of social pressure and personal desire. And it is in those ordinary moments that the final conflict of Revelation 13 is already being decided, long before any formal enforcement system comes into view. The beast of Revelation 13 demands worship. That is its defining characteristic, not obedience in some general sense, not social compliance. Worship. The text is explicit and repeated. The first beast is worshipped by all whose names are not written in the Lamb's Book of Life. The second beast causes the earth to worship the first. The image of the beast is set up, and those who refuse to worship it face the threat of death. The economic exclusion, the buying and selling restriction, is the mechanism of enforcement for a fundamentally religious demand, which means that the mark of the beast is, at its core, a religious issue dressed in economic clothing. It is the institutionalization of a form of worship that competes directly with the worship of the Creator, and the test it presents is not, will you accept this technology, but will you bow to this authority? Loyalty, in the context of Revelation 13, is the practical expression of worship. It is what happens when worship meets the pressure of real-world consequences. It is easy to declare allegiance to God in moments of comfort and community. It is an entirely different matter to maintain that allegiance when maintaining it costs you something real. Economic access, social acceptance, legal standing, physical security. The saints described in Revelation 14, the ones who stand on Mount Zion with the Lamb, having overcome the beast and his mark, are described specifically by what they refused to do. They did not bow. They did not receive the mark. They did not exchange their loyalty for survival. And their victory is described not as a supernatural escape from hardship, but as a faithful endurance through it. They overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, not loving their lives even unto death. This is the standard that Revelation sets before every believer in every generation, and with particular urgency for those living in ours. And it is a standard that exposes a very uncomfortable truth about the state of much contemporary Christianity. A faith that has been built primarily on comfort, on cultural belonging, on the expectation of material blessing and social approval, is a faith that has not been tested at the level Revelation 13 describes. It is a faith that may be genuine, but has never been asked to cost anything truly significant. And the spiritual formation required to stand in the moment of the final test is not something that can be compressed into a crisis response. It is built over years of ordinary faithfulness, of choosing truth over convenience in small things, of practicing loyalty to God in moments when no one is watching and the cost is modest, of allowing Scripture to shape your conscience at a level deeper than cultural comfort. The good news, and there is profound good news in all of this, is that Revelation 13 does not describe the final conflict as a scenario where the outcome is uncertain for those who belong to God. The Lamb's Book of Life is a real record. The seal of God, described in Revelation 7, is a real protection. The God who calls you to faithfulness in the final hour is the same God who has sustained his people through every previous hour of trial, persecution, and pressure that history has recorded. The call of this moment is not to fear the beast. It is to deepen your knowledge of the one whose authority the beast can never ultimately override. And that call leads directly into the next layer of this prophecy, a dimension that most modern interpreters overlook entirely, and that holds the key to understanding not just what the mark is, but what it is truly asking you to choose. The detail is easy to read past. A single verse in Revelation 13 describes the mark being placed on the right hand or the forehead of those who receive it. Most readers encountering this for the first time process it as a physical description, a literal location on the body where a literal mark will be applied, and the prophetic imagination immediately begins populating that description with modern equivalents: a chip under the skin of the wrist, a tattoo on the scalp, a biometric scan tied to a specific body location. The physical reading is instinctive, partly because it is concrete and partly because it fits neatly into the technological framework that dominates the popular conversation about this passage. But when you read this description through the lens of the biblical tradition that shaped it, a completely different and far more profound picture emerges, one that changes not just how you understand the mark, but how you understand the nature of the entire final conflict. The language of forehead and hand is not invented in Revelation. It is inherited from the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible written by Moses and foundational to the entire Hebrew prophetic tradition. In Deuteronomy 6, the passage known as the Shema, the central declaration of Jewish faith, God commands his people to keep his words on their hearts, to teach them diligently to their children, and to bind them as a sign upon their hand and as frontlets between their eyes. The hand and the forehead, in the Hebrew understanding, were not arbitrary locations. They represented the totality of the human person in their relationship to divine authority. The forehead, the front of the mind, the place of the face and identity, symbolized the realm of thought, belief, conviction, and conscious allegiance. The hand symbolized the realm of action, labor, expression, and lived reality. Together, they described a person fully consecrated to God, thinking his thoughts and doing his works. When Revelation 13 places the mark of the beast on these same 2 locations, it is making a deliberate and devastating theological statement. The beast is not merely demanding physical submission, it is demanding the replacement of God's seal, his law written on the mind, his character expressed through the life, with a competing allegiance that occupies those same sacred spaces. The mark on the forehead is the mark of a mind that has accepted the authority and the worldview of the beast's system. The mark on the hand is the evidence of a life lived in practical conformity to that system's demands, regardless of what the person may privately believe. And this is where the prophetic picture becomes most searching, most personally challenging, because it reveals that the mark is not something passively received. It is the accumulated result of decisions made in the mind and expressed through the hands over time. Consider the practical implications of this symbolic understanding. A person can reject the idea of the beast intellectually, can argue against it, preach against it, post warnings about it on social media, and still, through the habitual choices of daily life, gradually align their thinking and their behavior with the values of the system that the beast represents. Comfort over conscience, acceptance over truth, convenience over conviction. These are not dramatic choices. They are the quiet, daily preferences that, accumulated over years, shape what a person ultimately is, what they actually believe when it costs something to believe it, and what they actually do when it matters. The mark on the forehead and hand is not tattooed in a single moment of crisis. It is inscribed by 1,000 small decisions made long before the crisis arrives. The counterpoint to this, the seal of God described in Revelation 7, follows the exact same pattern, only in the opposite direction. The seal of God is placed on the foreheads of his servants, not their hands, because the seal is, at its foundation, a matter of the mind and heart. It is the deep, settled, cultivated knowledge of God, his character, his law, his truth, that has become so genuinely part of a person's identity that no amount of external pressure can dislodge it. The hand follows not because the hand is sealed separately, but because genuine allegiance of the mind inevitably expresses itself in consistent action. The sealed person does not merely think rightly about God in moments of spiritual reflection. They live in practical, daily, observable alignment with the authority of God, even when it is inconvenient, even when it is costly, and even when the surrounding culture has made a different choice seem entirely reasonable. This understanding reshapes the entire conversation about how to prepare for the final conflict. The question is no longer primarily about which technologies to adopt or avoid, which financial systems to trust or resist, or which political developments to monitor. The foundational question is, whose seal do you bear right now? What does your thought life reveal about whose authority you have genuinely accepted as supreme? What do your daily choices, your financial decisions, your social commitments, and your responses to pressure reveal about where your deepest loyalty actually rests? These are not comfortable questions. They are not meant to be. Because the God who places his seal on his people does so in response to a real, living, tested faith, not a theoretical one. And the system that demands the mark of the beast is not waiting for a future law to begin its work. It is already shaping minds and directing hands in the world we inhabit today. One of the most significant blind spots in the popular conversation about Revelation 13 is the almost exclusive focus on technology at the expense of the institutional dimension of the prophecy. Revelation 13 does not describe a world controlled by algorithms and devices operating in a vacuum of pure secrecy. It describes a world where recognizable human institutions, political powers, and religious systems have formed an alliance powerful enough to command global compliance. The beasts of Revelation 13 are not corporations or government agencies in the modern bureaucratic sense. They are the ancient, recurring patterns of human power, the merger of religious authority with civil enforcement, expressed in their final, most comprehensive form. And to understand the mark of the beast without understanding those institutional patterns is to misread the prophecy at its most foundational level. The first beast of Revelation 13, rising from the sea, carries the combined features of the four beasts of Daniel 7, the lion, the bear, the leopard, and the unnamed fourth beast of terrifying power. In the prophetic tradition, these beasts represented successive world empires: Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. The composite nature of Revelation's first beast indicates that it is not a new power appearing from nowhere. It is the consolidation and culmination of those historical empires, a power that inherits their geographic reach, their political methods, their claim to universal authority, and above all, their religious presumption. It is a power that has positioned itself between God and humanity, claiming an intermediary role that belongs to Christ alone, and using that claim to generate the kind of loyalty and submission that the Bible reserves exclusively for the Creator. The second beast, rising from the earth, is distinct in character. Where the first beast rises from the sea, a biblical symbol of restless, chaotic masses of peoples and nations, the second rises from the earth, suggesting a more settled, familiar, culturally embedded origin. This beast has two horns like a lamb, a deceptive resemblance to Christ, the Lamb of God, but speaks like a dragon, revealing the true source of its authority. It performs miracles, calls fire from heaven, and constructs an image of the first beast that the world is commanded to worship. Most significantly, it is the second beast that implements the economic system, the buying and selling restriction, making it the enforcement agent of the first beast's religious authority. This is not a technology company. It is a religious and political power using the tools of its time to enforce a form of worship. The alliance between these two beasts, between the globally dominant religious power and the nationally embedded political power that serves it, is the institutional core of the final conflict. And that alliance follows a pattern that is not without historical precedent. The combination of religious legitimacy with civil enforcement power has been one of the most potent and dangerous forces in human history. When religious authority claims the right to define the terms of social belonging, and when civil power agrees to enforce those terms through economic and legal mechanisms, the result is a system capable of generating precisely the kind of comprehensive pressure that Revelation 13 describes. The specific institutions that will fulfill these roles in the final crisis are identified with greater precision in other parts of Scripture and prophetic interpretation. But the pattern itself, the merger of religious authority and civil coercion, is the engine of the system that produces the mark. What this means for the present moment is both sobering and clarifying. The conditions for this institutional alliance are not being assembled by technology companies or artificial intelligence laboratories. They are being assembled in the intersection of religious influence, political ambition, and social crisis. Areas where technology can play a supportive role, but where the driving forces are fundamentally human and institutional. Pay attention to the growing conversations in the United States and around the world about the relationship between religious identity and national belonging. Pay attention to moments when civil authorities are asked, or volunteer, to enforce religious or morally defined norms through economic or legal mechanisms. Pay attention to the increasing pressure on individuals to demonstrate their loyalty to communal values through specific, verifiable acts of compliance. These are not abstract prophetic projections. They are active dynamics in the present political and religious landscape. The prophetic picture that Revelation 13 paints is not one of helpless victims overwhelmed by forces beyond their understanding. It is one of informed, spiritually alert witnesses who recognize the pattern, who understand the institutional architecture of the final conflict, and who are therefore not surprised or destabilized when it takes shape around them. The person who has studied the prophecy carefully, who understands not just the technological dimension, but the institutional and spiritual dimensions, is the person who will be able to maintain clarity and conviction when the social, economic, and religious pressure of the final crisis reaches its full intensity. And what that clarity ultimately points toward, the practical, daily, deeply personal nature of the preparation required, is where this entire video has been building from the very first word. Because the technology being tested is one layer of the story. The institutions being aligned are another. But the heart of the matter is something that happens in a place no surveillance camera can reach and no algorithm can access. Having established what the mark of the beast is at its core, a spiritual allegiance expressed through the totality of thought and action, enforced by the institutional alliance of religious and political power, it is now both appropriate and necessary to return to the question of technology, not to reverse the theological foundation that has been carefully built, but to place technology correctly within the prophetic framework. Because dismissing the technological dimension entirely would be its own form of prophetic blindness. The 5 technologies being tested in 2026 are not coincidentally aligned with the infrastructure of Revelation 13. They are genuinely, soberly, and with full theological seriousness, the most capable tools that have ever existed for implementing the kind of global compliance system that the prophecy describes. They are not the mark, but they are the architecture within which the mark will operate. And that distinction, real and critical as it is, does not reduce the urgency of understanding them. Think of it this way: a road is not a destination, but the destination you are heading toward determines what it means to be on that road. If you are on a road that leads to a cliff, the road is not the danger. The cliff is. But understanding that the road leads to the cliff is the only thing that gives you the ability to choose a different path. Technology, in the context of Revelation 13, is the road. It is the infrastructure of surveillance, identification, economic control, and behavioral compliance that makes the enforcement of the final system logistically possible at a global scale. And understanding this clearly, without confusing the road for the destination, is not paranoia. It is prophetic literacy. It is the ability to read the landscape of the present moment with eyes informed by the map that Scripture has provided. The smartphone, as already described, is the most intimate and comprehensive surveillance instrument ever voluntarily adopted by a global civilization. It does not need to become the mark to play a decisive role in the final conflict. It already serves as the primary interface through which billions of people manage their financial lives, their social identities, their access to services, and their participation in public life. When the system that Revelation 13 describes reaches its enforcement phase, the smartphone is the most immediately available channel through which compliance can be verified, access can be granted or restricted, and individual behavior can be monitored and shaped. It will not be repurposed for this role. It is already designed for it. The infrastructure exists, the behavioral data exists, the technical capability exists. What does not yet exist, in its final form, is the institutional mandate to deploy that capability in service of a specific form of religious and economic compliance. Biometric systems add the layer of physical identity, the undeniable, uniquely personal marker that makes it possible to link a specific human body to a specific compliance status in real time. Facial recognition systems already in operation in airports, transit systems, and urban environments can identify an individual within fractions of a second. Combine that capability with a programmable digital currency system and a compliance database, and you have the technical foundation for a buying and selling restriction that requires no physical chip, no visible mark, and no dramatic enforcement theater. The exclusion is automated, instantaneous, and silent. You approach a point of transaction, your face is scanned, your compliance status is checked, and access is either granted or denied, all in the time it takes to blink. The bureaucratic infrastructure of Revelation 13 does not require science fiction technology. It requires the technology that is already operational today. Artificial intelligence, in this context, is the nervous system of the entire apparatus. It is the system that processes the data generated by billions of interactions, identifies patterns of compliance and resistance, predicts which individuals represent loyalty risks, and optimizes the application of pressure to maximize conformity. AI does not need to be presented to the public as a tool of religious enforcement. It can operate under the language of security, efficiency, fraud prevention, and social stability, the entirely ordinary language of institutional management. That is precisely what makes it so effective as a mechanism of control. It is invisible, relentless, and operates at a scale and speed that no human bureaucracy could match. And the people subject to its analysis are, for the most part, entirely unaware of how comprehensively they are being profiled and managed. What all of this means, taken together, is that the technological infrastructure of the final conflict is not assembling itself in secret. It is assembling itself in plain sight, under the entirely reasonable and widely accepted language of innovation, convenience, safety, and progress. The road is being paved, the systems are being normalized, the behavioral patterns that make compliance feel natural are being cultivated right now, in the daily habits of billions of people who have never read Revelation 13 and would not see themselves as participants in a prophetic drama. And yet, the drama is unfolding, the prophetic clock is advancing, and the only thing that determines where you stand in it is not which technologies you use or avoid. It is the depth and authenticity of your relationship with the God whose authority stands over every system, every institution, and every technology that has ever existed or will ever be developed. Which brings this entire journey to its final and most important destination. Every prophecy in Scripture ultimately moves toward a decision, not a theological position, not an intellectual conclusion. A decision, personal, costly, and made in the specific conditions of a specific moment in history. The prophecies of Daniel move toward the decision of three young men standing before a golden image with a furnace behind them. The prophecies of the Exodus move toward the decision of an entire people at the shore of a sea with an army behind them. And the prophecies of Revelation move toward the decision of a global generation standing at the intersection of the most powerful institutional and technological forces ever assembled in human history, with a single question pressing against every conscience. Who will you obey? Not who do you believe in, not what tradition do you belong to, not what theological framework do you subscribe to. Who will you obey? When it costs something real to answer that question honestly, this is the question that Revelation 13 and 14 are designed to produce. And it is a question that does not wait for a formal crisis to begin its work. It is already at work in the daily, ordinary, unremarkable decisions of every human life. Because obedience is not primarily a crisis behavior, it is a habitual one. You obey what you have been practicing obedience to. In the moment of maximum pressure, you do not discover your true allegiance. You reveal it. The character formed by years of daily choice is what stands or falls under the weight of the final test. This is why the letters to the 7 churches in Revelation 2 and 3, written before the prophetic visions of the beasts and the mark, are so foundational. Jesus does not begin the book of Revelation with a warning about the beast. He begins it with a searching examination of the present spiritual condition of 7 real communities of faith. Because the community that will stand in the final test is built in the present moment, from the material of ordinary, daily, tested faithfulness. The contrast that Revelation 14 draws between those who bear the mark of the beast and those who bear the seal of God is not a contrast between the informed and the uninformed, between the technologically cautious and the technologically naive, or between one theological tradition and another. It is a contrast between those whose deepest allegiance is genuinely to God, whose minds have been shaped by His truth, whose lives have been oriented by His authority, whose sense of identity and security rests in His faithfulness, and those whose deepest allegiance, whatever their religious vocabulary, is to the systems, structures, and values of a world that has organized itself around human authority rather than divine. The mark is not primarily an external brand, it is the external expression of an internal reality. And the seal is not primarily a supernatural inscription, it is the visible evidence of a character formed by genuine relationship with God. What does this mean for you right now, in the specific circumstances of your life? It means that the preparation for the final decision is already underway, whether you are making it intentionally or not. Every day that you choose truth over convenience is a day of preparation. Every time you prioritize your relationship with God over the approval of people around you, you are building the character that will stand under pressure. Every time you allow Scripture to challenge and reshape a preference, an assumption, or a habitual choice, you are deepening the roots that the storm of the final crisis will test. And every time you choose the path of lesser resistance, the comfortable compromise, the harmless accommodation, the small daily surrender of conscience to convenience, you are moving, however incrementally, in the direction that Revelation 13 describes. Not dramatically, not visibly, but really. The message of hope that Revelation carries, and it does carry a profound and genuine hope, is that this process is not irreversible. The God who sees the state of every human heart is not watching with condemnation. He is watching with invitation. The same book that describes the mark of the beast with devastating clarity also describes the angel of Revelation 14, flying in the midst of heaven with the everlasting gospel to preach to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, calling them to fear God, give glory to Him, and worship the one who made heaven and earth. The call to worship the Creator is not a demand issued in the language of threat. It is an invitation extended in the language of love, made urgent by the lateness of the hour and the weight of what is at stake. The God of Revelation 14 is the same God who said, "I have loved you with an everlasting love." He is not asking you to earn your place in the final conflict. He is asking you to know Him well enough to trust Him when everything else tells you to look elsewhere for safety. If this video has done what it was designed to do, you are not leaving it with more anxiety than you arrived with. You are leaving it with more clarity. Clarity about what the mark of the beast truly is, not a chip, not a system, but a spiritual allegiance. Clarity about what the final conflict truly demands, not technological resistance, but genuine, cultivated daily faithfulness. And clarity about what is being asked of you in this specific moment of history. Not perfection, not full theological mastery, but an honest, open, willing response to the God who is still speaking, still calling, still drawing people into the relationship that is the only real preparation for whatever is coming. If this message has moved something in you, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment below and tell me, what part of this video challenged you most? Because what you share might be exactly what someone else in this community needs to read today. You have stayed until the end, and that means something. Not every person who began this video is still here. Some left when the content became too searching. Some left when the theological framework challenged their existing assumptions. Some left when the personal application began to press against a place they were not ready to examine. But you stayed, and the God who sees every human heart sees that too. This is not a small thing. In a world engineered for distraction, choosing to sit with a serious prophetic message for this long is itself a form of spiritual decision. It is a small expression of the kind of intentionality that the final test of Revelation 13 will demand in a far larger measure. And it matters. What you have encountered in this video is not a new interpretation or a novel theological proposal. It is the ancient, consistent, biblically grounded witness of the Christian tradition on one of the most urgent questions any generation has ever been asked to face. The mark of the beast is not a future technology problem. It is a present spiritual reality, a conflict over worship, loyalty, and ultimate allegiance that is already shaping the world in which you live, work, worship, and make your daily decisions. The infrastructure is being built, the institutional conditions are advancing, and the daily, incremental formation of human character and allegiance, in one direction or the other, is happening right now in the unremarkable moments of ordinary life. Sit with this question for a moment, not in anxiety, in honest reflection. If the final test were to arrive in your life this week, not in the dramatic, sudden form that prophetic imagination often imagines, but in the quiet, economic, social form that Revelation 13 actually describes, how prepared would you be? Not theologically, personally. Is your prayer life deep enough to sustain clarity under pressure? Is your relationship with Scripture intimate enough to anchor your conscience when the surrounding culture moves in a different direction? Is your sense of identity and security rooted enough in God that economic exclusion or social marginalization would not shake your fundamental orientation? These are not questions designed to produce guilt. They are questions designed to produce honest self-examination, the kind that leads to change, growth, and genuine preparation. The path forward from this moment is not complicated. It is not primarily about changing your relationship with technology, restructuring your finances, or joining a particular movement or community. The path forward is the oldest and simplest invitation in the Christian tradition. Draw near to God. Open your Bible not as an academic exercise, but as a conversation with the one who knows your name, sees your circumstances, and is actively working to prepare you for what is coming. Pray not as a religious obligation, but as the authentic expression of a real relationship with a living God who hears. Engage your local community of faith not as a cultural routine, but as a genuine fellowship of people who are, together, building the kind of character that will stand when standing costs something. These are not complicated steps, but they are not small ones either, and they are the steps that matter most. The book of Revelation does not end with the mark of the beast. It ends with a city, a new Jerusalem, descending from heaven, radiant with the glory of God, its gates never shut, its river of life flowing freely, its tree bearing fruit every month, its leaves for the healing of the nations. That is the destination. That is what the final conflict is ultimately protecting. Not a theological position, not an institutional tradition, not a particular interpretation of a chip or a code, but a relationship. An eternal, unbreakable, face-to-face relationship between the Creator and the human beings He made in His image and has refused to abandon through every chapter of the painful, beautiful, redemptive story of this world. The mark of the beast is the enemy's attempt to sever that relationship by replacing its allegiance with something lesser. And every day that you choose God, in small things and large, in public moments and private ones, is a day that declares that the attempt will not succeed in you. If this video has stirred something in you, a question, a conviction, a desire to go deeper, I want to know about it. Leave a comment below and tell me what moved you most. Share this video with someone who needs to hear a prophetic message delivered without fear and without confusion. And if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, this is the moment. There is more to come. More of the same serious, biblically grounded, prophetically alert content that this community was built around. The hour is late. The message is urgent. And there is still time to prepare, not by knowing more, but by becoming, through daily faithfulness to the God who calls you by name, the person who already knows how to answer when the final question is asked.